So what is The Flame in the Flood? Well, it's a post-apocalyptic, procedurally generated river rafting roguelite. It's a survival crafting game in a near-future apocalyptic Southern America. And there's also quite a big mystery as to what exactly is going on. From the game's wiki, it says, travel down a long, winding, and completely unique procedurally generated river through environments inspired by the Everglades, Mississippi Delta, Louisiana Bayou, and other quintessentially American places. Your journey has an end. Will you survive long enough to reach it? So some of you may be asking, procedurally generated, what's that? Well, it means it's all random. So comparing, like, say, to Breath of the Wild, the map is always the same, right? Your experiences might be different because you can go anywhere and do anything, but the map of Hyrule is always the same. Or say, for example, Halo. The campaign is always the campaign. It's always the same levels. You always go to the same places. This is completely different from both of them. Every time you play a new game, the river will be different. You play as a girl, and you have a dog companion. And the main goal of the game is just to survive as long as possible and make it as far down the river as possible. You do this by keeping you/the girl healthy. And there's 4 different categories: food, water, temperature, and sleep. They all have their meters that slowly deplete over time. And you have to keep all these as full as possible, or else you'll die. And seriously, you will die so much in this game. It's absolutely nuts. So there's 2 different gameplay segments. The first is river rafting, and you need to avoid damaging your raft while navigating different areas of the river and to find places to dock. The second aspect of gameplay is you find a place to dock and you explore, you forge, you craft, and you survive. Now, there's a checkpoint every new chapter, although progress is saved every time you dock. However, if you die, you restart from the previous checkpoint at the previous chapter. So if you make it to day 5 or day 6 or day 7 or however long you make it without reaching chapter 2, if you die, you start the game over. And I did that a lot, and that was a big source of frustration. Anyways, let's talk about the dog. The dog is pretty cool. He'll help you find loot and warn you of dangerous animals. He has extra storage pouches, so that comes in handy in a pinch. The game is played as an isometric top-down view. There's limited camera movement, but I kind of like this. It really adds to the unique art style, which we'll talk about in a minute. Oh my gosh, the rain. It rains so much. It literally rains probably even more than Breath of the Wild. It's just out of control. It's absolutely crazy. I wonder, though, maybe if that has something to do with what happened to this whole apocalypse thing. It explains why there's so many rivers and why you're floating down this endless river, basically. Now, there's no attacking when wild animals come around, so you can't kill wild animals and get them. You can press X to scare them away. Oh, and by the way, your staff, it glows at night, so it's got some really Gandalf wizard level stuff there, which is pretty cool. It's Y to access your journal, and within the journal, there's a couple different pages. So the first page is your goals, keeps track of like quests and things to do. The next page is your afflictions page, which just tells you if you're healthy or not. And the middle page is for crafting, and so any items you have that, yeah. The next slot is your inventory, which shows your tool belt, your backpack. And finally, the last page is your clothing inventory, what you're wearing, as well as a temperature meter, which I honestly kind of find confusing. I'm not exactly sure how that works. So I really like how there's no background story as to what caused this apocalypse and what exactly is going on. And no one in the game even knows what's going on. Like, there are a few NPC characters you run into a couple times, and they don't even know what the heck is going on. Which reminds me, I don't really like how NPC conversations flow. You have to press A twice to move forward, once to say what you're going to say, and then the second time to confirm, yes, that is what I want to say. It really should just be once. It's a minor complaint, but yeah, that's what it is. So I made it to the 3rd area, and I died so many times. Man, if I didn't have the patience that I have, let me give you an example. I was minding my own business, then all of a sudden I got hit by a snake, or I got struck by a snake, and I didn't have the antidote, which is either dandelion tea or sumac tea. So I'm scrambling to find dandelions or sumac, but I also have no clean water. I have to filter the water. So I found the 2 charcoals, the 2 cattails, but I didn't have a rag. I had sterile bandages, but you can't use a sterile bandage as a rag, which doesn't make any sense. Sterile bandages are made from dirty rags and alcohol, so it's like these are purified rags. Why can't I use this rag to purify my water? So I'm going from dock to dock to trying to find all this crap, and trying to find a fire to boil it, which, by the way, fire only spawns at campsites, and so I can't find it. I can make a fire, but I can't find it, and also you can't boil water to purify it, which doesn't make any sense. So I'm going from dock to dock, going all over the river, but I can't find it, so I die. But even if I had found it, I still don't have a fire or any way to make a fire. And again, like, you can't clean water by boiling it with fire, which is ridiculous. So yeah, stuff like that happens all the dang time. I learned my lesson, though. I stay away from snakes. I learned that certain hissing noise is in fact a snake, and I need to stay the crap away from them. So yeah, the only enemies you really need to watch out for are snakes and wolves. Snakes will keep to themselves, and they'll only attack you if you get too close to them. So just pay attention. Once you hear the hiss, use the right analog stick to look around a little bit to see if you can find it. Wolves, however, they will hunt you down, whether it's 1 or 3. Sometimes they'll just spawn out of nowhere. So again, you can wave your staff around to scare them off, but if you don't have a trap or a way of dealing with them, you need to just get out as soon as possible. Or sleep until the morning, if you have a campfire or a church or something to sleep in. Now, back to the clean water thing. You can fill up your jar with clean water. There are certain wells in the game that you can come across every once in a while. But anytime it's raining, just fill up all your jars immediately, because it'll fill it with the rainwater and it's clean. And it took me a while to figure that out, but I'm glad I figured that out. Also, I died a ton while I'm on the river due to starvation or dehydration, because I didn't see, when I'm playing it on the TV, my TV actually crops the sides a little bit, so I didn't see this at first. But there's actually a quick access menu when you're rafting on the river that accesses all your food and water, so you can actually eat, apply medicine, and do things like that when you're river rafting. You don't have to be docked in an area, so keep that in mind. So every time you select something or craft something, there's like a time counter, and it's great that you can still cancel it even when it's in the middle of crafting. So a couple of times I accidentally ate some poisonous items. I'm like, ah, crap, no. So I just pressed B, and then, whew, I saved myself from restarting yet again. Sometimes you need a workbench to craft things like stronger tools and clothes. And upgrading your clothing and upgrading your raft is absolutely crucial. You just have to do that. But luckily the game is forgiving enough that it won't give you brutal areas and brutal rain all the time until you get to these more advanced areas where you get these more advanced supplies, which will allow you to craft more advanced tools and clothing. So let's talk about the graphics and the UI. It is pretty simple. It's just like this journal thing going on with the 5 different pages. Goals, afflictions, crafting, inventory, clothes, and outfitting. It took me about an hour to figure out the UI and just to figure out the flow of the game. The overworld is very similar, I feel, to Inside and Limbo. It starts rural, but then it gets more industrious. But then sometimes it reverts back to rural again, because it is procedurally generated. I really love the Tim Burton-esque art style. It's just really, really great. I mean, look at this game. It's definitely one of a kind. And I find that a very strong aspect of this game. It looks so different from any other game I've ever played. And I quite like the art style. The art style is very fitting, I feel, to how the game plays. And I also quite like the soundtrack. The soundtrack, just the ambient noises is really good, but then anytime you get back on the river and start rafting, it'll play another song. And all the songs are just really, really good. One thing, crows are super annoying. That they play a huge part of the sound design. They just crow or they just caw and caw. And you need to get rid of them immediately. So just go up there and press X to wave your staff around and scare them off. And that'll do 2 things. 1, it'll prevent other animals from noticing your presence, like boars and wolves, which will come to attack you. And 2, you get a feather out of it, which will allow you to craft bows, which is pretty cool. Also, for the sound design, snakes and the wolves' sound effects are super creepy. And if I don't have a trap or a way of dealing with them, I run to the raft immediately because it's freaky and they'll just murder you really quick if you don't get out of the way. All right, so let's wrap it up. Just share some personal thoughts. So again, it took me a few hours to figure out how to play the game based off of what I was able to experience in the game. There is no manual, and I didn't bother looking it up. One thing, though, the game is so freaking brutal. It's just absolutely ridiculous how often you'll die from this game. It wasn't until the 4th chapter that I really hit strides. I really figured out how to manage items, what items to look for, which places I needed to dock, and dozens of deaths to figure out my own personal flow and how to play the game. When to leave the raft, when to sleep, when to skip an area entirely and not dock in a certain place, when to upgrade clothing and pouches, etc., when to craft, what places to look for when you're low on certain supplies. It's really easy to want to upgrade your pouches and expand your storage, but do that later. Please, just do that later. I don't know how you'll experience this game, but those are my thoughts, and this is kind of how the gameplay looks and feels and plays. I enjoyed it for the most part, despite its brutality and how many times I died. It got really frustrating, and so I've had this game for about 2 months now, and there were times I just had to take a step back for a couple weeks because I was so frustrated about the constant deaths. But overall, I enjoyed the game, so if any of these things sound good to you, then I think you might like it. Otherwise, if you're not very patient or you want an easier going experience, I'd avoid it. But there you go. There's my review. Thanks for watching.